I'm going to dedicate today's and tomorrow's videos to cover a dissertation that was able to successfully combine different disciplines to showcase you that it is possible, even though you do not have access to huge labs, as long as you have the determination and the tenacity to not give up and to be passionate about the project that you want to work on. And of course, as long as you are part of an institution such as a university, it is possible, even though you do not have everything set in stone and access to, let's say, huge EEG labs and or huge neuroscience labs. In this particular example, this dissertation managed to combine 3 different disciplines: neuroscience, information science, and cognitive psychology. The part of the neuroscience was more specifically geared towards combining EEG data, collecting EEG data, and analyzing EEG data. The information science part was to establish the neural activities, or I should say neural oscillation activities, aka brainwaves activities, during a well-established information science key theoretical framework known as the information search process model. And the cognitive psychology part was to incorporate how affective sections of the information search process model could be then combined to the neuroscience discipline and vice versa. Let's first cover the information search process model, since this was one of the key theoretical framework positioned by this dissertation. So within the information science, which is a huge field, by the way, essentially because everything in it is information, this particular part of the discipline, information science discipline, is extremely huge. In the cohort of, for example, different information science program, you can literally find any and all topics related to information where these PhD students work on their dissertation. In this particular case, so in this particular dissertation, the key theoretical framework that was covered for this thesis was the information search process model, which is one of the biggest and most cited theoretical framework within the field of information science. Essentially, what this information search process model establishes is that when we set out as humans to look for information, we tend to do certain things in certain orders, and not only doing them, but at the same time, we go through different cognitive processes while doing it, as well as going through different types of emotions when we're doing this. And the Dr. Kulthauer, Professor Kulthauer, which was the scientist who keyed and coined this information search process model theoretical framework, has established this phase of us looking for information into 6 different stages. For the purpose of this video, we're not going to cover all 6. We're going to cover 3 of them, mainly because this dissertation established that there are only these 3 phases that we go through as humans once we set out to look for an information, especially when we use technology such as our phones or different browsers to use different search engines to look for information. And as you already know, when you conduct a lab study, you do need to come up with a lab design, with a research design that is doable in a lab setting, because you also need to control your variables really well. Otherwise, you cannot call it an experimental study. And because of this particular reason, when you do studies like this, you do need to be well defined, do a very good job in defining what it is that you're testing. In this case, we have to really fine tune and define that we are, for example, testing the information search within a human being, and this human being is going to use XYZ in order to find and retain that information. The first phase of the information search process model that was investigated by this thesis is called exploration. It's the exploration phase. And the way it is defined in the information search process model is when the participant or subject of the test is embarking on a journey to explore and find background information about a topic of their choosing. In this stage, the participant is not quite familiar with the details of the subject matter that they are exploring, and the types of emotions that they are usually feeling is uncertainty, a feeling of discomfort. While they are being curious about a subject, they are still not sure as to what they're going to find, if they're going to find any information. And so for that reason, this part of the information search process model is combined with a little bit of a negative emotions in terms of, if you want to call it negative, of course, but it's a feeling of unease, uncertainty. And this is where the subject embarks on finding background information about a topic. The second stage that this thesis investigated is the formulation phase of the information search process model. This is when the subject have found enough information, enough background information to formulate a focused area where they feel like, okay, based on what I thought I'm gonna find, now this information is a little bit more focused. I'm still not 100% yet there to have found what I'm looking for, but at least the information that I found, it's a little bit more focused. It's not as vague and uncertain as it was when I started in the exploration phase. In the second phase, the participants feel a little bit of clarity. They are a little bit calmer, but still a little bit on the edge as to whether they're going to find information or not. And the third and last phase that this particular thesis focused on is the collection stage or collection phase of the information search process model. And the collection stage is when the participant feels that they have enough information and that they have found the information that they're looking for. At this stage, the participants are extremely calm. They feel content. They're not necessarily happy and goofy, but in comparison to how they started, they do feel more positive emotions. And so, as you can see, starting from the exploration to formulation to collection phases of the information search process model, the participants went from uncertainty, not knowing what's going on, embarking on this journey to trying to find information. And as I mentioned, in the lab, it's a very specific information that the moderator or the scientist is telling them to find. And then they go into formulation, they feel much better, they have gathered some information, to collection, where they are not necessarily goofy and happy, but they are in comparison much more content, they are calmer, and at that point they have found information. And so this particular thesis looked at these three phases, but the person who conducted this study realized that the information search process model of these three phases was able to establish how humans react at a physical level, at the cognitive level, as well as the emotional level. But what was missing was at the neurological level. In other words, what is the brain activity like when a human being goes through these different stages of information search process model? In other words, what happens at our neurological level, at our brain activity level and or brain waves activity level when we set out to look for information. And as you already know, anything that we do, everything that we do in our lives is about taking a step towards finding something out, whether it's a gossip or a scientific paper or figuring out where your spouse is or whatever the case may be. It's always a type of an information processing level that happens within our brain. And because this key theoretical framework of information search process model was able to beautifully categorize these different steps that we go through when we look for information, this thesis decided to look at what happens at the brainwaves level when we go through these different stages where we as humans start seeking and finding information. And the findings of this thesis was astounding, even to the researcher itself, because there were areas that were discovered that nobody had seen before. And now, after 3-4 years post the publication of the thesis, now there are being more and more confirmation from big institutions such as MIT, where these type of brainwaves activities are being more and more correlated and corresponded and related to, for example, the way in which we process information. What exactly the brainwaves activities that happen during the information process of these 3 steps, I will cover them tomorrow. But for now, you have enough basic line and baseline information as to how this thesis combine these 3 different disciplines that seemingly not had a lot to do with one another at this juncture at least, but was able to successfully complete the thesis and also defended the thesis and ended up winning the Best Thesis Award of the university. So for that, I will see you then tomorrow for the follow-up video of this video today.